that we understood what is combustion, which kind of substance undergo combustion. Now, do you think that combustion can happen just anytime we want? Suppose if you are having a substance, suppose you are having a paper, it is it possible that the paper will start burning on its own anytime? No. Had that been the case, then every time it would have been fire everywhere. But that doesn't happen, right? So for a paper to catch fire, there are certain criteria, certain conditions which needs to be fulfilled. When those criteria are fulfilled, only then the process of combustion takes place. So here we'll talk about the three criteria, three conditions without which combustion will never happen. The first criteria or the first condition is fuel. That is, a combustible substance is needed. Because until and unless you have a combustible substance, so obviously which object will catch fire? So you need to have a substance which easily catches fire. Second condition is air. That means oxygen. Why? Because as I mentioned before also, that oxygen is extremely important for combustion to take place. Now, what happens during combustion? The substance reacts with oxygen. So, without oxygen, there will be no reaction, there will be no energy released. So, oxygen or air is very important for the combustion to take place. Now, the third criteria or the third condition is heat. Now, the question is, why do we need heat? We need heat because we need to increase the temperature of substance to a particular temperature so that it can catch fire. Now we are going to talk about each in detail. The first point, that is combustible substance. This we had already discussed. Without this fuel, without this combustion will not take place. Even not all substances readily burn. Those substances which easily burn to produce a lot of heat and light, they are called combustible substances, and one such combustible substance has to be present for combustion to take place. Now the second factor, that is air. Now why air is necessary for combustion? To understand this, we'll do a small observation. For instance, for this we need a candle which is already lit. And see this candle right now, it is you can see the candle is lit, the flame is seen, right? Now I take a glass and just put the inverted glass over this candle like this. So what will happen? What happens here? The candle still glows for some time, but after some time it goes off. Why? See, initially it was glowing, right? Now when we put the glass, it still glowed for some time, and after that it went off. Now why did it go off? Because when we put this glass, we have actually limited the amount of air which is being produced, which is being provided to the candle. When the glass was not there was plenty of air surrounding the candle, right? So it was utilizing the air, it was utilizing the oxygen, and the process of combustion was taking place. But now when we have put the glass, so it's only that much of air which could be accommodated inside this glass. Little amount of air is there, right? So this amount of air, this much air is available to the candle. Whenever you put the glass over it, some air has to be there. So this candle utilizes that air, all the air which is present inside the glass. But after that, there's no air, there is no oxygen. When there is no oxygen, no combustion can happen, and therefore it just went off. So this set tells us that air or oxygen is necessary for combustion. You can also do this. You can lift the glass a little upwards here, so that a gap is created here. Okay, so some amount of air enter through this gap, therefore the candle will not immediately go off. Instead it will start to flicker. And why the flame flickers? due to the limited supply of oxygen that is from this gap which you have created here. So due to insufficient supply of oxygen. So this experiment proves that air is very, very necessary for combustion. Now the third criteria, that is heat. Now, why is heat needed for combustion? Before we discuss this, let's talk about simple scenario like you are having a matchstick. How does a matchstick burn? Does the matchstick catch the fire on its own? No, we need to put in some effort. We have to strike the matchstick against the rough surface of matchbox. Only then matchbox catches fire. Sorry, matchstick catches fire. Now, why do we strike it? Why is it that needed? That is because when we strike the matchstick with this matchbox, there is friction, and friction produces heat. And when this heat is produced, it increases the temperature of matchstick. And when the temperature increases, it catches fire. So, what we got from this example, any combustible substance catches fire only when its temperature reaches ignition temperature. Now, you might ask, what is ignition temperature? So, it's not that any substance will catch fire at any time at its own wish. So, a substance will catch fire only when its temperature reaches a particular temperature. So, in order that the temperature reaches that temperature, it has to be provided some heat. Only then the temperature will rise, and that is why heat is needed for combustion. So, ignition temperature is the lowest temperature at which a substance gets fire. See, the word ignition, it has come from ignited, to ignite something, to burn something, or to make something catch fire. That is ignition. Now, this temperature, this ignition temperature, it is the lowest temperature at which a substance can catch fire. And this temperature is not same for all. Temperature is different for different substances. So every substance will have its own ignition temperature. There will be some substances which has low ignition temperature. Now, low ignition temperature means they will very easily catch fire because already the ignition temperature is low. Now, if the ignition temperature is high, it will not catch fire easily. So, substances with low ignition temperature can catch fire easily, more easily. Now, you will be able to understand why do we need to strike the matchstick? Because when we strike the matchstick, friction is involved, and friction produces heat. And this heat increases the temperature of the matchstick so that it will be able to read its ignition temperature. Now, you might ask, is matchstick a combustible substance? Of course. Do you know what is the most important constituent of the head of matchstick? It is phosphorus, and phosphorus is highly reactive. It reacts very violently with air to catch fire. Even not only phosphorus, small amounts of sulfur and potassium chlorate is also present. We will discuss about it little later. So for now, uh, we understood that heat is important for combustion. So a substance will not catch fire or will not undergo combustion on its own. So every substance will have an ignition temperature, and under that the substance reaches that ignition temperature. External In order to make the substance to reach its ignition temperature, external heat needs to be applied to the substance. So we found that three conditions are very important for combustion to take place. That is a combustible substance or a fuel, air, and heat. Let's look at more examples of different substances having different ignition temperature. Here I'm taking two examples of paper and wood. Both are combustible substances. Now, which of these do you think catches fire easily? If you bring a small uh, matchstick to both of these, what will happen? Burning matchstick, what will happen? Paper will immediately catch fire. Why? Because the ignition temperature of paper is comparatively lower. Now, since the ignition temperature is lower, as soon as you provide little heat by burning a matchstick, by bringing a burning matchstick near it, it reaches its ignition temperature and it catches fire. Whereas in case of wood, it might not readily catch fire. Whereas if you take the burning paper near it, then it will catch fire because the entire burning paper will provide more heat to wood, and because the ignition temperature of wood is little higher, so would need more heat to reach that ignition temperature. So if you look at the values of ignition temperature, the ignition temperature of wood is around 300 degrees Celsius, and of paper it's 218 245 degrees Celsius. So whichever object will have a lower ignition temperature, then that object will easily catch fire. So that is why paper will catch more easily, will catch fire more easily because its ignition temperature is low. So we got the three conditions. We understood the three conditions which are very, very important for combustion to take place.